So, you want dynamite darts content? Well, Alex Moss and Burton DeWitt have you covered. Love these guys. For bullseyes, bounce-outs, and darting brilliance, keep it right here. You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. Now, I'm Canadian and often get asked how Canadians call out a maximum, a 180? Well, it sounds something like this. 100, eh? T.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast. Alex Moss here, joined as always by my co-host, darts statistician Burton DeWitt. We took last week off. We're back this week. How are you getting on?
I'm doing just well, back from my holiday to Mexico. Came back in one piece, so no complaints there. How are you, Alex?
Glad to hear. Well, you're going to be heading back to Mexico for the World Championship, as we heard on our last show. Peter Wright said he's going to sort you out with that. But yeah, all doing well here. Good to be back and really enjoyed that show that we put together a couple of weeks ago. Nice to catch up with Peter Wright, and that's where we're going to start with this week's show. We're going to be looking back at the Super Series in Barnsley last week. Peter Wright wins on the final day like he always does, and is now provisionally number one for the World Championship, £3,250 ahead of going price as things stand. What do you think will be the main hurdles each player now faces to get that top seed berth for Ali Pali?
I mean, I guess really their main hurdles are each other, because they're both playing at a level that it's going to be tough for anyone to beat them in any given tournament. They're both playing that well. And that's why they each won a title this past week. That's why Peter Wright nearly won 2 titles this past week and won the World Match Play. They're alongside, in my opinion, alongside Jose de Sousa, the 3 best players in the world right now. And we'll hear from Chris Murphy later. He thinks Van Geuren is still in that top 3. I think Van Geuren, at best, is 4th right now. And you can make an argument is even further down on current form, but has shown flashes. But that means Peter Wright and Gerwyn Price are each other's biggest hurdle. And they're going to be playing each other very likely in the money end of the major tournaments this year. So who's going to be number one obviously comes down to how well they play. And obviously anyone can beat anyone on any given day. But it very likely, or very possibly at the very least, can come down to who wins a match between the two in the final in Dublin, or in the final, I should say, in Leicester, or in the final in Wolverhampton. Because they very likely will be meeting in the finals of those events for this rest of the season. So, I mean, yeah, okay. And now we're going to go out and lose first round at all the remaining majors, because that absolutely can happen, and there'll be a nice jinx if it does. But I have to say the biggest hurdles are each other, because you're going to expect that they're going to play with the number one ranking on the line at some point this year, if not multiple times, and deservedly so, because they are, alongside Jose de Sousa, in my opinion, the 3 best players, and the rankings more or less reflect that.
Yeah, that's a great point you make. I didn't actually think of that these 2 players, they've played in big finals in the past, the UK Open, the Grand Slam, played in lots of big games, World Championship semi-finals as well. But arguably, if these 2 meet in a final between now and the start of the World Championship in one of the big TV events, and there's going to be a few coming up in the last few months of the year, that could prove to be the difference. We know what the prize money is like for these events. Absolutely, that could be a huge game with lots riding on it, especially if it maybe comes down to the Players' Championship finals. And that, of course, that doesn't go down to your world ranking. That goes down to the prize money that you've won on the Players' Championship events. But if they are on the opposite side of the draw, then that could be a very big game going into Ali Pali. But just looking at how these 2 guys played last week, and I've got to give a mention to what they did in Barnsley. Gerwyn Price, one of the greatest comebacks that we've ever seen on the Pro Tour, it's got to be said, in the final, 6-2 down against Damon Heta, and he rattles off 6 of the next 7 legs. He wins them in 11, 12, 12, 11, 11 and 13 darts. And the one leg that he did lose in that sequence, I think he had a dart at tops to win it in 12 darts. That is quite an incredible run of legs to pull off, especially in a final when you're losing and you can come back and win it like that. And that will do Gerwyn Price's confidence the world of good going into, okay, we've got a bit of a break now, but when we come back for the European Tour, he's going to be feeling like it doesn't matter what position that he's in the game, he can come back. And with Peter Wright, the consistency is back to where it's been in the past. He's continuing where he left off after the World Match Play. Very consistent over those 3 days. I think it was 15 out of his 16 games. He had a 96 plus average, which is pretty good going. And if he can keep this format for the rest of the year, he is going to take some stopping. But I'll pick out a couple other hurdles for me, and one of them is going to be the next events that they are going to play in, and that is the European Tour. You've got 2 events in September, Hungary and Gibraltar. We don't know if we're going to get a third or a fourth one. We spoke about it on the last show, but those 2 Saturdays are going to be massive in terms of qualifying for the European Championship if it does end up just being those 2 events to qualify. Of course, the seeds, they're already through to the second round, but if they both lose in the second round, that prize money doesn't go towards that order of merit. So 2 big Saturdays coming up, I think, next month for these players and a lot of the players as well, but especially in that race to get to number 1, because these players have had big runs in the European Championship before. Gerwyn Price got to a final 2 years ago. Peter Wright won it last year. And if they're not going to be in that event and one of the others is, that could be a big factor as well.
Now, second PDC title, 4th final overall for Ryan Searle this past week at the Super Series. It moves him up to number 33 in the world, just a few thousand quid behind Jermaine Waddamena for a debut in the top 32. It seems like only a matter of time now before he gets there. Are we looking at a potential maybe top 16 player or even further? How far do you think Ryan Searle can go?
It's a tough question to answer. And there is, a bit of a gap between players that can break into the top 32 and then breaking into the top 16. That is another big push that you have to have in your career. But Ryan Searle, as you say, he's on the brink of the top 32. Could be in there by the time we get to the World Grand Prix. He's going to be in that event. That's another big event that he's going to be involved in. But I've got to mention, okay, he's got the title last week. He's second that he's got in the PDC now. But I want to mention the averages that he's been throwing. I believe he's set a new personal best average for himself in the PDC 4 times in the last 4 or 5 weeks. He's had 110, 111, 112, 116 last week in the semi-final on the way to winning that title. And that tells you that his A game is right up there with the very best in the world. Now, he's not going to be able to produce that every single game. No player can do that. So for him, I think it's about getting a base level of consistency and looking at his averages across the Players' Championships this year. 95, 96, he's in that top 20 range, which is a good place to be. But I think we're looking for him to get into the top 16. We are looking away from the floor events. We're looking at the TV events, and he is a player that is getting more experience on the big stage. Last year, he got to 5 out of the 7 TV ranking events. That's the best he's ever done. Before, he got to 3 and 2 in his 3 previous seasons. This year, he's 2 out of 2 so far. The UK Open, the World Match Play. He's going to be in the World Championship. He's going to be in the World Grand Prix, the Players' Championship finals. He's won that title, which should put him in the Grand Slam. European Championship, the other one. He's qualified, I think, for 2 out of the 3. It's a tournament that he's never qualified for, but I think that is going to be the big thing that's going to stop him getting in the top 16 is qualifying for these events more regularly, getting to all of them every year, and then going on a deep run. We've seen him get to a couple of last 16s in the World Championship, have some really good games on that Ali Pali stage, but if he can start getting some deeper runs on the TV, I think that is going to be what is the difference. And he's practicing with Gary Anderson. That seems to be paying off as well, and not just playing games with him, but I think those little tips that you're going to get from Gary, he's going to be telling you about such and such experience that he's had on the big stage. And there's not many players that have got more experience than Gary Anderson when it comes to playing on the big stage. So I think Ryan Searle is in a very good place at the moment, getting towards that top 32. I think he will be there very soon. And the next step for him is, can he crack the top 16?
Yeah, and I should add, Kieran Hurd sent us this question. Wanted to discuss it anyway. So unfortunately, it doesn't count as a listener question, Kieran, but thank you for sending it in. But yeah, I want to go back, 5 years now to 2016, because that's when we first saw Ryan Searle in PDC darts. But he was overshadowed because that's also when we first saw Rob Cross showing up just after, and also Barry Lynn, to mention that, after both Barry Lynn and Rob Cross had those great runs at the UK Open, Lynn making the quarterfinals, Rob Cross making the last 32, but withstanding MVG at his best. Rob Cross then goes to the Challenge Tour, makes the final the first event. The next week at the Challenge Tour, makes the final of the first event again. And then at the next 2 sets of Challenge Tours, wins a title and then wins 2 titles. Rob Cross was the clear-cut class coming out of that Challenge Tour season, and all the attention was on him. And what did he do in 2017? He only goes on and wins the World Championship and goes up to world number 2 with only 12 months on his ranking. The other person to get out of the Challenge Tour that year was Ryan Searle. And it took Ryan a little bit longer to find his feet. But he did win a title at the second set of events in Wigan. And then at the third set, he made a final. And then at the fourth set, in the very last event, when he needed to have a run to make sure that he finished in the top two to qualify, to get ahead of a former world champion who finished third that year in Richie Burnett. He goes on in the final event, wins the title to get his tour card. So it took him a little longer than Rob Cross to get up in the Challenge Tour that year. And it obviously took him a little bit longer than Rob Cross to really find his feet on the senior tour. But he did, making a final in his second season. And then last season, winning his first title. This season now, making two finals and winning one of them. It's been a much more gradual increase, but he's been getting better and better. He's also been disappearing for times, as I've said before. It seems like he takes off 9 months, but that doesn't seem like that's the case as much anymore. He's not having these long droughts where he's just not competitive. He's becoming more competitive even when he's not playing his best. And that's been the big difference. He's playing better more often. And when he's playing better, he's playing even better than what was better then. And he's not dropping off like he was in the past. And that's why he's going up the rankings. How high can he go? I don't know, because I don't think we've seen the best from him. I don't think we've seen the most consistent from him. He's finding his feet still 5 years later, but he doesn't. There's not that much more he needs to find to become a top 32 player, a top 24 player. Can he be a top 16 player? I don't know. I think it's too early to say that because we still haven't seen what his top game is. But there's no reason to think that there aren't enough years that he can't get to the top 16 based on what we've seen, especially more recently. And also, one last thing. If you look at those last three finals he's made, they've been against Michael Van Gerwen, who he beat, Jose de Sousa, and Peter Wright. Three of who I said earlier in this show were the four best players in the world. Maybe next month he'll go against Gerwyn Price and complete the lot. And maybe he'll beat Gerwyn Price. That'll say a lot more, especially now, since he has those titles over Peter Wright and Michael Van Gerwen. If he can get a title over Gerwyn Price, that's the top three rankings, all in the space of a little more than a year.
It would be pretty special. Now let's move on to our first guest on this week's show. It is a former BDO major winner, and he is the player who's currently top of the UK Challenge Tour Order of Merit, Jim Williams.
I'm joined today by the former world finalist and the man who's leading the UK Challenge Tour Order of Merit halfway through the season, Jim Williams. Jim, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, good.
And thanks for joining us. Let's start with the weekend just gone. A title, a runner-up, two other quarterfinals from 6 events. How do you reflect on your 3 days in Milton Keynes?
Yeah, no, it's good. To be quite honest, a lot better than expected. I've not really practiced or played hardly anything for the last 18 months. So, yeah, to go and do that and play somewhere near as I can was good.
Now, the weekend didn't get off to the best of starts. You lost in the first round, first event or second round. But as a player, how do you spend that long break between events on a day like that where you have, especially when you lose early in the first event?
Yeah, to be honest, it sounds silly, but it kind of set me up. Like I was really disappointed in the game I'd lost in the second round, and I shouldn't have lost it. And I think it kind of focused me for the rest of the week, to be fair.
Well, whatever it did to focus you obviously paid off because you came back, won the second event, beating Adam Smith-Neal, who also had a big weekend, 5-4 in the final. What pleased you most from that run to the title? I
think like the whole 3 days really was just a consistency. It was like the first two events perhaps weren't quite as good, but I was going in completely rusty. But yeah, I was just happy really how kind of easy I felt. Like, because normally you have a bit of spell off like that. It's awkward and you're not sure what's going to happen. But no, to be fair, it was good.
Yeah, you mentioned you went in rusty, but obviously it didn't show, especially as the weekend went on, going in a few hundred averages, including 109 in there on, I believe, Saturday. How do you feel about your game now after getting those 3-4 days of competition in?
Yeah, obviously I'm a lot more confident now because I was going in there on the Thursday just really not knowing how it was going to go. But yeah, like they say, to consistently average sort of 90s, like it helps your confidence. You know you can give most people a game with that.
Now, we last had you, we'll come back to the Challenge Tour in a minute, but we last had you on in November, just before you played in the Winter Series on the Pro Tour. How did you find those 5 days going against the PDC's best?
I really enjoyed it, actually. Again, like I said, I went into there rusty. I hadn't played for months before that, but again, I played all right. Yeah, it was as good as could be expected, anyway.
Now, you also told us when we spoke in November that you just started up a business as well. How's that going? What's it like having to juggle work and darts, and especially now that the calendar is starting to fill up again?
Yeah, there wasn't a mix, to be honest. I've been working sort of flat, like 7 days a week almost for probably 18 months now. But yeah, it's getting on its feet now and it's going really well. So it's busy, but I've got a couple of lads giving me a hand now, which helps obviously when I'm away. So yeah, hopefully I can juggle the two now.
Of course, this past January, for the first time, there was not the BDO World Championship. You made the final of the last one at the O2. You made a few other deep runs playing in it, 6 out of the last 7 years before that. What was it like, though? Was it strange for 2021 to roll around and not have that trip to the Lakeside or the O2 to look forward to?
Yeah, it is the one event that us guys kind of play towards and get yourself ready for. So yeah, to not have it was a bit gutting, really. But you know, everyone's in the same position, so you just got to try and do your best and carry on as much as you can.
Since then, of course, the WDF have announced their first World Championship, and it will be at the Lakeside, where you've had some great memories. You're already in that field of the World Championships, WDF World Championship, that is, as the winner of last year's Scottish Open. What was your reaction when you found out that you would be in the field?
Oh, it's great to be at Lakeside. It is great. It's probably an iconic venue in darts, and it really is special. You know, when you get there, I've not had that feeling of walking into anywhere like the Lakeside. So, yeah, as a player, it's a special place. So I'm really happy it's back there.
So you mentioned the feeling of walking into the Lakeside. Can you tell us, for someone who's never played, in fact, obviously I've never played, but never even been to the Lakeside, what it's like when you walk out on that stage, especially like the first time?
Yeah, well, the first time is definitely the hardest time. I mean, I was kind of like a rabbit in headlights the first time I went there, but yeah, you kind of get used to that. But it's everything about it. I don't know. It's the atmosphere in there is just, it's the best venue I've ever played in.
Now, you might be back there in January or February, whenever the World Championship takes place, but you also might be playing at the Alexandra Palace at the halfway stage of the season. You lead the UK Challenge Tour Order of Merit. We don't want to get too far ahead because there's still half a season to go, but the WDF have said anyone who plays the PDC World Championship won't be able to play at Lakeside. If it comes down to it, have you made a decision yet which you would play, or is that something to decide going forward?
Yeah, obviously it's a bridge I got to cross when I come to it, I suppose. We're not going to know now till September whether I do finish top or not. But yeah, we've got a decision to make. Now,
Welsh darts continues to be on the rise. Wales winning the PDC World Cup. Gurren Price is the world champion, the world number one. Johnny Clayton, Premier League champion. You and Wayne Warren both making the world final over in the BDO. And of course, could keep going. Is this the best place that Welsh darts has ever been, you think?
I think so, yeah. I mean, yeah, even the depth of it is good now, but it's always been strong. I mean, right from when I started, we used to do a lot of tournaments down in South Wales, and like the standard was so good there, and it is still so good. So, yeah, it puts the Welsh players in good practice all the time, to be fair. But like I say, and then you've got Garwin and Johnny there leading the way in the PDC or in the world, to be fair to them. So, yeah, it makes everything seem possible.
Well, of course, there's also the Mad Welsh Championship belt, and you currently hold that, having beaten both Richie Burnett and Jamie Lewis in your first two bouts. Any idea who you're going to take on next and, when that will be?
Yeah, we don't know yet. I think now, because it's opened up and all a little bit, people can sort of start bidding for that opportunity to play. So, we're not going to know for a while, I don't think, who that'll be or where it'll be.
Now, you're part of Mac Elkin's stable of players, and he was, I believe he was with you in Milton Keynes at the weekend. How important is it to have a manager in today's game, especially with the support that it brings you?
Yeah, it's great. Mac is one of the best, and he does make it so easy for you. I mean, everything's booked, so you do just turn up and throw darts, really, which is perfect for the play, you know. But I've never really had that until Mac. Like the BDO and that, we've always sort of sorted ourselves out, and the more you do it, the more you learn about booking things. But it does make it easier with him, definitely. And not only just that, I suppose as a supporter, like the other players he's got in his stable, you get messages off him, and that helps as well. Like especially like people like Glenn, you know, he's very experienced in that, and he'll give you a ring sometimes and just put you in a good place.
You mentioned Glenn, who of course you've been friends with dating back to when you both were in the BDO. You said before that you watch a lot of his games. How hard has it been, though, to see his drop in form over the past 9 to 12 months? And you mentioned as well how he speaks to you when you're down. Have you spoken to him at all?
Yeah, we speak a lot, to be fair. It's difficult to watch him do it because he is one guy, and I didn't think a drop in form like that would ever affect him because he was always so strong mentally, which is obviously a big part of the game. So, it's sad really seeing it up, but you know he's probably the best player I've ever played. So you know he's got the game. It's just hope he can dig it back out again.
Yeah, and let's go back to talking about you. It's now around 3 to 4 more weeks until the Challenge Tour season resumes and it concludes with the last 6 events. We had on Matt Campbell a few weeks ago. He's the European leader, and he said that he'd be treating it as 6 completely new events and not looking at the order of merit. Do you have the same approach or something different?
Yeah, I think you've got to go with that approach. If you start defending things, that's when things start to go wrong. So, yeah, I would approach that the same. But, like, again, on the other hand, last year, I think I finished 6th overall in the order of merit, and I missed the first 6 events. So I've got a massive head start to what I had last year.
Yes, indeed. And then what is the plan until the next set of Challenge Tours? Do you have any events lined up, either locally or practice sessions or anything like that?
In all honesty, no. I've got, I go down to Southampton later tonight, actually. We're playing in the Modus, and I'm in the Champions League. It's Champions Week of the Modus lot, so I've got that coming up. But yeah, other than that, there's not really a lot. I think we've got Chelsea then in September, and then sort of October it picks up with the WDF. So yeah, to be honest, whatever I can play in, I'll play in.
Well, Jim, thank you so much, and good luck. Hopefully there are some events to play in going forward.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Jim for joining us. Now let's talk some Challenge Tour. Jim Williams is top of the UK Challenge Tour order merit at the halfway point of the season. 6 events to go still in September. But is this going to be the time we see Jim fulfil his potential and win a tour card?
It obviously seems a very decent shout that he will, based on the fact that he's top of the halfway stage, but still has to keep it going for another 6 events. That said, he's played 4 more events than anyone else, 4 more matches than anyone else in the field. That's basically and that's over Adam Smith-Neal, and at least 7 over everyone else. So that means he's been going, in essence, 1 round further than everyone else every single event. That's the standard he's playing at. Throw in that he's averaging 1.5 points more than anyone else in either the European or the UK Challenge Tour so far. Shows that he is playing at a standard above everyone else. That plays out over the course of a longer season. You'll hear from Chris Murphy later talking about the women's series, that you expect that when you get 12 events as opposed to 4, the best players will rise to the top. Jim Williams seems to be a cut above everyone else, at least so far in the Challenge Tour. If he keeps that up, and there's no reason to think he won't, he'll do it over another 6 events and he'll stay at the top. He's already there after 6 and he's playing even further above that. I think so. I think he can keep this going. But again, it is a blind draw. He could end up going against Colin Osborne in the first match next time out and go out, and then get another difficult draw like Adam Smith-Neal, first match the next one. So there's a lot of luck that comes into what the draw is playing, because if you end up drawing one of the other best players a bunch of times, you might win, but you also might lose. He does need a little bit of luck. The Challenge Tour does need a little bit of luck, no matter how good you are, in order to find your feet on any given day and win some matches, get that prize money, and ease the pressure. But again, he's playing at that level that you've got to think he's going to win that tour card. And also, I think he will hold on. I think we will see him reach that potential and be on the Pro Tour next year because of his topping the Challenge Tour.
Yeah, he's put himself in a great position, and you got to say, arguably, the Challenge Tour is one of the hardest tours to predict in darts because of that varied standard that we have among the players. You've got players that can average in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. You've got players that are averaging in the 80s, the 90s, the 100s, as we saw this past weekend. So it is very hard to call how these events are going to go. And as you mentioned, the blind draw as well, you could draw one of those top players in the first round. You could maybe get a more favourable draw and work your way through. It is just, it's difficult to call, but he's put himself in a good position. He's £400 ahead of second place. Okay, he's not got a big gap like Matt Campbell's got in the European Challenge Tour, but regardless, that's the place that you want to be after these 6 events, is top of the list. But you also want to be top after 12 events, and we've seen in the past on the Challenge Tour, just go back to last year, I know we've mentioned it before, but we had that long break because of the virus. They came back with 6 events. Dave Evans picked up 2 titles on that last weekend to finish top, and he was nowhere after those first 4 events. And even better than that, Richie Edhouse, the final day, he won the first title, got to a final in the second event, and he finished second on the list. And if he'd have won that final, he'd have got the World Championship spot as well. So it all is going to come down to that final day, I think, regardless. Okay, maybe Jim could win a title or 2 in the first couple of days, and that could seal the deal. But if he has a difficult first couple of days, then there'll be a lot of players going into that final day thinking, if I can put it all together in these couple of events, we could sneak it. And as we know, there's only 1 spot compared to 2 this year. The top spot gets the tour card, gets the World Championship spot. So not as much leeway for error as there is in previous years. But yeah, I think this could be the time for Jim Williams. He's a player that's, you got to say, he's been in limbo for the last 18 months. A lot of those last 18 months because of the virus, because of the BDO's demise, the WDF only just really getting started and not getting started in Europe just yet, as far as the big events that Jim would usually go to. And of course the Mad title that he's got as well, the Welsh title, that's kept him a little bit occupied. But yeah, I think he's put himself in a great position. But it's the old cliche, it's one event at a time. He's top of the table. He needs to be top after those 12 events. All these first 6 won't count for anything.
Talk, though, about some of the other players on the Challenge Tour. What a weekend it was for Scotland. Darren Beveridge, Jim McEwen, Shaun McDonald, and Jamie Clark all claiming titles. Nathan Garvin making a final, some good runs from Robert Thornton. Who else, though, caught your eye in Milton Keynes?
Quite a few players, and one I'll mention is one of those Scottish players, Jim McEwen, who won a title. We beat Jim Williams in one of the finals, who was the man to beat for the first weekend. He's the player that is top, but beat him in the final to get the title. Put in some good averages on the way to getting that title as well, some high 90 averages, 100 average as well. But it's also got to be said, he's missed out, hasn't he? Unfortunately, he's one of the unfortunate players that had to withdraw from that final event, the second event on the Sunday, and still a lot of speculation going around on social media. Not much coming from the PDC as far as confirmation on things, but we've heard a lot of rumours about a player testing positive, and off the back of that, players, close contacts, having to withdraw from the final event, in some cases mid-game as well. So I'm sure there'll be more information to come on that. But Jimmy, in the final event, averaged 100 in his first game and then had to withdraw. And if he carried on playing like that, it could have been another big run for him. But he got a title, so he was definitely one that caught my eye over the weekend. A few other players I've got to mention as well, and Connor Scott, he was a guest on our first show, a good friend of the show, making a semi-final in the first event. That's his first semi-final in the PDC, so another milestone for him to tick off. The Challenge Tour as well, we know that there is a lot of quality of players that enter this tour, but you've also got that big gap in consistency. That's what's, for a lot of cases, stopping them going further, getting a tour card, getting through Q School and performing well on the tour and keeping that tour card. We know that these players can average 100, average high 90s. We saw John O'Shea 108 average on the final day, but they can also average in the low 90s, below 90. So a lot of the players did impress at times, but yeah, I think you've got to say Jim Williams for being top and the title winners as well. And Mike Warburton as well, I'll give a mention to him. Probably didn't get the rewards that his performances maybe warranted, but second, I think, on the list of averages in the end, but lost a few tight games, which could prove costly for him getting that tour card as well.
Throw out one other name didn't discuss, and that's your best mate, Adam Smith-Neal, winning a title. The only title winner we didn't mention, as well as qualifying for the second Euro Tour event at the qualifier. So good week for him. I'll focus, there were a lot of good performances, but what really caught my eye was a who and a what. And you focused on the what. But I'll start with a who, which is another Scotsman, Cameron Menzies, because it's now the third time, at least the third time that I can recall in his PDC career alone, that he has timed out of a match. He timed out a couple of years ago at the UK Open between matches because he got lost. And then this year at Q School, he timed out because he was on the toilet. This, now for the third time, he has timed out because he fell asleep watching Rangers. And that's understandable. If I had to watch Scottish football, I too would probably fall asleep. So I understand that. But this is now 3 times. He has been scheduled to play a darts match and didn't show up. And that's problematic because that affects the entire draw. Now, someone gets a bye. Someone gets a little bit of extra money. Someone, though, also you could say someone also misses out on the match experience that they thought they were going to get and now has to wait around for another hour or so before they have to play, which could mean they're playing in the end worse in their next match. This is affecting other people's careers and taking a spot in the field away from other people because he has not been mature enough to make sure that he is there to do his job. And I think it's time that he gets a suspension as a result of it. Not a major one, but he's been supposed to be in the field. He wasn't there. He should be suspended for the next set of Challenge Tour events. I think after 3 times, it's time that the DRA does something, because this does put the game of darts in disrepute, especially since he's done it in a television tournament. Not showing up is a problem, and Cameron Menzies deserves a ban for it. But let's go on to the what caught my eye, and that was what you mentioned yesterday. All those withdrawals that all of us or forfeits suddenly showing up in the final Challenge Tour event. And as of right now, it's still rumor. So there's a lot of caveats with what I'm about to say. And I'm not even going to mention names because right now it's just a rumor as to who was the cause of it. Regardless of what led to it, if a player knew he had COVID and decided to show up, whether it was because he faked a negative test, whether it's because he diluted his sample, whether it's he had someone else take a test for him. I've heard all 3 of those as possible rumors. I don't care what it is. If it's true that a player knew that he had COVID, showed up anyway, and played, that is absolutely abhorrent and it cannot be tolerated. The player, whoever it is, if that is true, should be banned for life. And that should be banned for life. I don't care if he was 18 years old. There's a chance that someone could die because of his actions. There's a chance that someone's career has been ruined because of his actions, because who knows what would have happened in that 6th event or in those Euro Tour events. That could have been the breakthrough that someone was waiting for. And now, because of his decision to do something that could be criminal, they've lost out on that opportunity. It needs to be a lifetime ban from PDC darts. Now, I think the player should be allowed to apply for reinstatement sometime in the future. but it needs to be at least as long as the players who have been suspended for match fixing, because this is worse than match fixing. This could actually lead to someone dying. Match fixing, other than the fact that indirectly now the money didn't go where it's supposed, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. You can say, yes, anything can lead to anything. The butterfly flapping his wings. What this person did could actually lead to someone dying. That is worse than match fixing. If match fixing gets you 7 years, then he should have to wait at least 7 years before he's allowed to even apply to the DRA to have his ban changed. But it needs to be a lifetime ban up until then, if all the rumors are true. And once those 7 or 8 years have passed, he can then go and apply for reinstatement. That doesn't mean he'll be reinstated. It is a lifetime ban, and it's up to him to show that it needs to be shortened. I hope that the DRA does that, because anything less than that is just not an adequate punishment for how serious this was.
Burton coming in with the hot takes, and guys, as always, let us know your thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Tweet us as always. We love to hear your thoughts. Well, let's move on to our next guest on this week's show. It is another winner on the Challenge Tour this past weekend. Here's our chat with Shaun McDonald. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the newest winners on the PDC Challenge Tour, Shaun McDonald. Thanks for joining us, Shaun. How are you doing?
Hi, lads. I'm very well, thank you. How's yourself?
Doing well too, thank you. And let's start with the weekend just gone. On Sunday, you won the 5th event of the UK Challenge Tour. What was that moment like when the winning double goes in and you are a PDC title winner?
I think at the time when I won it, I don't think I got to appreciate it there and then, because as you know, there was 2 events a day, and that was the first one on Sunday. So they were also trialling starting the second event from the semi-final stage of the first event. So I knew that the second event had already started, and I'd be on pretty much straight after winning the first one. So I probably didn't get a chance to reflect, what I'd done until the evening, once the darts was all done at that point. It was just come off. It was obviously congratulated by a number of people. Was buzzing that I won it, but I quickly had to refocus on the second one.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that with the Challenge Tour, the 2 events in a day. It was 12 minutes between that title-winning double going in, and you were back playing your first game in the day's second event. On the flip side, if you go out early in the first event, there's a long break, 2-3 hours. How do you prepare for those situations?
Very differently. I mean, first of all, playing 12 minutes between event 1 and event 2 is a great problem to have. Take that every time, because it means you've made the final of the first one. Interesting to know what Nathan Gervin thinks of just having lost the final and then only having 10 or 12 minutes to then start. I'm sure his view would be very different. I was still on a high. I was quite happy to keep playing, because obviously I was playing well. On the flip side, if you lose early doors, I think the quickest I lost in a morning event was last 64. So then you do have that spell of 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes before you're playing another match. And how I handled that was I kind of took about up until the semi-final stage of the first event, I would chill out at the table. I wouldn't really pick up a dart at that point. I'd only start practicing maybe an hour before the second one. I say the semi-final stage there, Alex, because they actually didn't start the second events on Friday and Saturday until the first events were finished, and then there was a change on Sunday to see how that went. So I didn't get if you'd gone out earlier on the Sunday, you would have had a shorter wait than you would have on Friday and Saturday. And I think that's a good move and a good idea, because you're holding back 250 people for the sake of 4 still playing in the morning event. And I think it is better to get going with the second one more quickly.
Definitely sounds like it. And what doesn't usually happen on these Challenge Tour weekends is the fire alarm going off in the first leg of a game, which is what happened to you in that last event on the Sunday. I think it was a 90-minute break you had before you got back up and running. Then we throw in the situation which forced all of the withdrawals. What was that like to be there and see all that going on?
Initially, my thought was get out of the venue. It quickly... I'd actually throw. It wasn't my throw. Ian was at the hockey at the time, And I'd actually started quite well. I'd thrown 9 darts, I'd 170 left. The alarm goes, and I'm thinking, this is not a drill. Like, there's no way that they would do a drill at this time with this event going on. My darts were already in my hand, obviously, because I'm standing behind Ian. I didn't even wait for his throw to finish. I just turned and walked towards the fire exit door. I wasn't hanging around. And it's strange how it quickly became, you could kind of feel in the room that, oh, there's a fire alarm. I guess we better walk towards the fire exit door to, oh my goodness, let's get out of here, because you could smell burning. So then everyone just obviously got outside, and you could tell it was something serious. And yeah, fire engines were on the scene within a small number of minutes. And I mean, the upside is that it wasn't anything too serious in the end, because they managed to nullify what was going on and assess the building safe to return, and it was only a 90-minute break. Realistically, that could have been end of play for the day. Coming back in, the PDC were very good. They gave us half an hour, gave us plenty of warning to the restart. Everyone started practicing, so it was the same for everyone. Very difficult to have that kind of break between a match, but same for all players. And yeah, those that started the restart better were the ones that went on to win.
2021, that has been your comeback year in darts. Let's go back to the start though. What are your earliest memories of darts, be it watching or playing, and what got you hooked on the sport?
What got me hooked on the sport was my dad and my grandmother used to play in local leagues and things. So it would be the fact that they played around me when I was young. I always had a sticky dartboard and up into soft tip, and then on to steel. When I was probably playing steel tip from a very young age, like I'm talking 2 or 3. I just enjoyed it. I used to always watch it on TV. Back in those days, you really only had Lakeside, and it was only live at the weekend. So I do remember going into school, that would be primary school, very tired because I'd stayed up till 1 a.m. to watch Jockey Wilson or Bob Taylor on the highlights, So that's kind of my earliest memories of getting hooked on it. But I just played all the time. It was kind of like, it's the same with my boys now. It's those winter indoor nights as a kid where you can't get out and do what you want to do as a kid. So what do you like to do? You like to do things indoor, and darts lends itself to that. But if you are sporty, and on those tough winter nights where you can't get outside, it's great to play, and it's also good for your counting as well,
Definitely right. Well, 2002, as a teenager, you won the World Youth Masters title. It's going to be the 20-year anniversary of that win next year. What memories have stuck with you from that run to the title?
Yeah, thanks for that. It makes me feel old. Memories of back then is they're still sharp in the mind. I was thrilled to win that event. I was a very good youth player. I'd won pretty much everything in Scotland, and I'd actually got to the quarterfinals of the World Youth Masters the year before. And yeah, in the final it was really cool to practice around the players. It was following our match. It was the start of the last 16 of the men's event, which was live on BBC. So all the players had arrived. So it was cool to practice with them in the players' room and then go on to stage. And like the camera crew and stuff, they used our game as a warm-up before they'd gone live on BBC. So it was like playing in front of 500 people with cameras all around you, and that was a brand new experience for me. So yeah, it was really nice to win and really good memories. I was proud to win that one.
And after winning a title like that, one of the biggest in youth darts at the time, did you have aspirations back then to become a professional, or did life take you in another direction with work and other interests at the time?
Yeah, no, I did try and go as far as I could at that time. I played a bit of BDO after that, and quite a bit of PDC. Tried to qualify for anything I could. I also played a lot of local darts, and at that time it was my ambition to try and get as far as I could in the game. Ultimately, I wasn't good enough at that point. I didn't have enough backing, even though I was extremely grateful for the backing I had. At that stage in life and what was going on, around me, it didn't fit. I had a bad spell on the PDC. I was starting to struggle financially with the cost of the tour, it was only when I was about 22, I think, I decided I need to take my life in a different direction, and that's when I got stuck. I decided I wanted to be a chartered accountant and mapped out how to do that, and got stuck into that career. So darts really did take a back seat from there.
Yeah, I mean, you took a long break from darts last year. Online darts really took off during the pandemic, and we saw you were active on the online scene. Did that time give you the urge to give Q School a go this year, or at least look to play more competitively again?
It certainly helped. It was just before that, actually. My two sons, Murray and Max, and Murray had turned 4, I think it was, and he now understood the game rather than just standing and throwing the board. He was starting to understand the game, and the three of us would often play. Obviously, Max was on the soft tip at that point, but Murray kind of got really interested, and we'd get in a little routine of when his little brother was going to bed. Murray and I would have an hour, and I just I was surprised in how quickly I picked it up again, and the sharpness came back. Because I hadn't played anything for 10 years at all, other than having a board in the house, and you have a little throw around the televised events when you get a little buzz from it. I wasn't doing anything, so once I was getting a little sharper, I kind of thought, right, I'll play a little bit of online stuff, and got into a little private league, which was really helpful, and there's a lot of top players in that league, and that just got me going back into it, and as kind of the deadline came for Q School, I just kind of thought, do you know what, I'm going to go and see what and see how far off I am.
Well, you certainly caught the eye at Q School without getting the tour card. 16th on the overall averages. You played 7 events across 10 days in the bubble. How did you find that experience?
The bubble actually wasn't too bad for me, Alex, because my job was taking me away probably 2 weeks of the month before the pandemic. So I was used to being on my own in hotels and in strange places, and finding things to keep yourself amused. And I think the fact that I worked throughout Q School, because of the nature of my job, you were beaten to leave the venue. Well, that just meant I went upstairs and got changed, went for a walk, got my head clear, and then got working. So it was probably a bit easier for me than some others to fill in the time, and I still had to keep up the work. So that kept my focus there as well. In terms of the darting scene around the bubble, it was difficult. It was restrictive. You couldn't eat or drink in the venue at all. Everything had to be room service, and that brought its own challenges. But I think everyone was just grateful to get a game of darts again. So that was the overriding fact, that it was just great to be playing competitively.
And not long after Q School, you were signed up by the Big Five management with a helping hand from our friend of the show, Andrew, of Inside the WDF. How much has having their support helped you continue to progress this year?
Well, everyone keeps saying before January, who is Shaun McDonald? What I would say is, because I played so long ago, I say, what is a management company?
Yeah.
I had to learn very quickly of what goes on now. And these, I wish these opportunities were there when I was in my early 20s, because we might have a different story. But yeah, so no, it's really good just to have, you know, someone at the end of your fingertips to call upon to sort out whatever you need, and you know that it's actually. I've obviously been with Big Five since Q School, but that was my first event with them. We haven't been able to play anything up until this point, so I really only got first-hand experience of being in a management stable, if you like, at the weekend. And yeah, it's fantastic, you know. Paul Brown's great. He was all over the place. How he manages to keep track of everyone in the stable, I've no idea. But you know, you're back at your table 1 minute from your previous match, and he's telling you board 19, game after next, get ready, you know. And that's, you know, that is what you want as a darts player. You just want to turn up, know when to play, and your only worry is about how you perform yourself. And also the upside of being in that environment is, you know, when you go back, we all stayed together in a house, and you know, you've got a bit of a team rapport going on. You're all sharing your experiences at night, and it just takes away that maybe that boredom, or you know, you can't really do it right now, but you know, you get these. You could be swayed into maybe you've had a bad day, so you go out and you really shouldn't do that. You should be back preparing for the next day, and being in a management bubble really takes all that away. You're going to get back, you're going to reflect, and you're going to get to bed at the time you should, and that certainly plays up to me. You know, I'm definitely one that would class myself as professional, so that's that kind of setup is going to benefit me, I think.
Well, speaking of professional, a lot of the professionals have a nickname, and more recently we've seen you in the online league, Paul Nicholson calling you the Punisher. Is that your nickname now, or have you decided on something else?
There's a story to that as well, Alex. I'm going to call out my cousin here, who's a big Marvel fan, and there's a few boys in the family who are all cousins, and as you can imagine, the banter on WhatsApp chats is very, very good. And he got dared into getting a tattoo if I took my comeback seriously, and made my nickname the Punisher. So he's now got a tattoo on his ankle. So yeah, I think I'm stuck with that one. My friend Willie Jew's a huge tattoo artist, is currently designing something for a shirt. So yeah, I think that one's secured.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing that. Well, it's the second Champions Week this week in the online league. You made it to the final of the first one. Richie Bennett missing the double for a 9-darter in the last leg of the final. What got lost was your average, 99 in that final, especially at that time of night as well. How do you prepare to play those sessions at night, finishing at 1:30, 2 o'clock?
Yeah, I watched your previous podcast, and I'm well aware that neither you or I'm sorry, the name of your co-host is going up my mind, but I know that neither of you guys watched it because you said you were in bed at that time.
Yeah, that's right.
To be honest, if you play, I was quite used to playing at that time. This is going to sound crazy, but if you play local league in Aberdeen, the way they do the singles events is they want to get the best player who's most consistent across the season. So you actually play your team match on a Monday night, and then you play one singles match against someone, whether you're drawn away from home, after the team event. So many a time I've been playing darts in a bar at midnight for one singles match, which is ludicrous, not to group it all together. But you just kind of, you prepare yourself in the same way. I was out exercising during the day, changing my body clock, making sure I had a nap before dinner time, and then, you know, I usually start practicing about 2.5 hours before you start playing, and you just need to kind of adjust that. The hardest thing actually was going from a morning group to a night group, having that real long break you maybe finished early afternoon and you're not playing until late in the evening the following day. That's the challenge. But I think that particular final had come out of the Friday night group into the Saturday night group, so I was already acclimatised to that. But yeah, you're right, it's not easy, but it's one of these things. I think I can kind of imagine if you make the last day on one of the shorter televised events in the PDC, you have to play afternoon, and then if you get to do your double session at night for the semi and the final, I kind of see the similarities in that you have to try and peak at the right times and do the right things to make sure you're not too tired to play when your game comes.
Well, every credit to you and all the players that do it. Me and Matthew are thankful that we've got the catch up on YouTube, so we can still get to watch the games, especially the late ones. But you did mention that you're from Aberdeen, which was actually my last darts trip. We did an on the road podcast on the opening night of last year's Premier League at the new venue, a lovely city as well. What would you recommend visitors to do when they visit Aberdeen?
Well, most visitors would probably come here for golf. The golf courses around here we're very spoiled. There's some world-class golf courses around. Suits will tell you that there's better courses down the coast, but that's incorrect. It's definitely up here for golf. There's a lovely beach here with a great promenade to go for walks. If you like your history, Aberdeenshire's got lots of castles that are taken over, and you can go and visit those and see the grounds. And if you're a walker or a cyclist, then you don't need to go too far outside the city to get some beautiful routes. So it's really nice up here. Obviously, being a city, you get spoiled with your choice of food and drink. If you're into the party scene as well, it's not too bad for a night out. So yeah, loads up here. I'm actually in the country now myself. Decided to bring up our family out there, and it's just a beautiful part of the country.
Good stuff. Well, the last two Aberdeen Premier League nights, we've had the big reception for the local hero, John Henderson. Have your paths ever crossed, and could we see you two become practice partners down the line?
Yeah, we were teammates for years in the pub scene, and then we played a bit of BDO pairs together. We were probably, that singles I'm talking about, we're probably rivals. For a while, we would have been the two to beat, and then obviously John's career then just skyrocketed, and fair play to him. I've been watching his career throughout, even when I've stopped playing. He's the one that's kept my interest in the pro game. We have been chatting a little bit. He only lives about 40 minutes from me, so yeah, we do have some intentions to practice together. I'm also practicing regularly with Suits at the moment. Suits is a little bit further away, but obviously we're both in Big Five, and we're both playing online darts regularly before. So naturally, we've been practicing together quite a lot. So yeah, the more practice sessions I can get with players of the calibre of Hendel and Suits is going to help me. So yeah, I fully intend to do that.
Excellent. Well, talking of Scottish darts, it seems to be in a strong place right now. 4 of the 6 Challenge Tour titles at the weekend going to 4 different Scotsmen, including yourself, Peter Wright, pushing to become the first Scottish world number 1 in the PDC. How would you rate the level of talent coming out of Scotland right now?
I think you're probably asking the wrong person that one. My knowledge of anyone in darts is only as it's only 6 months old. Other than the ProTour, obviously, which we see regularly on the TV and watching Hendel's results, like I said, I really haven't been in the game at all. Of what I've seen and who I've played, there is some real good talent coming through. Young Nathan Gervin getting to a final at the weekend shows there's young talent coming through. The winners are obvious, the 4 winners. And I'd play I'd played Darren and Jamie in the online league already. Greg Ritchie in that bracket as well, who's got bags of talent. And I also lost to Ian McKenzie on Sunday afternoon, and some of his performances was very good as well. Again, someone I didn't know at all. I've just met all these people, and I'm glad to see plenty of talent from up here. But who's coming through and who's the ones to watch? I'm sorry, mate, I have no idea.
No worries at all. One Scot that you have met is Cameron Menzies at the Challenge Tour, and you tweeted he was singing your name in the toilet. Is that the strangest experience you've had in the toilets during a darts event?
Yeah. Oh dear. I was pretty sure an official was going to come in and complain about the noise, because it wasn't quiet either. But yeah, not the most comfortable standing at a urinal and someone's creating a song in the background. Surreal. He's a good lad, Cammy. And we actually played each other the next day, which was good as well, because he was very young when I was coming through. He was a bit younger than me, I think, and when I was doing well in the young scene, he was just very young and coming through. So it was good to see him again. But hopefully he doesn't sing again in the toilet.
Let's hope so. Well, speaking of Twitter, it's refreshing to see when a player tweets during the weekend and events and gives their honest thoughts like you do. Is that something that you think you'll always do?
Yeah, I'm an open book, and I'm always honest, and I'm not into mind games or trying to hide. If someone's not in form or whatever, trying to hide it or distract it or trying to talk other people up or down or whatever. I just kind of, from me, you'll get actually what's going on. And I wasn't happy with Friday's performance. I've put in the work to be in shape for Challenge Tour, and that simply wasn't good enough. And I'm still level-headed. I'm not going to. I know how to rein it in and not let it go too far. But there's a lot of people watching you and wanting to know how you're getting on. And I just think when I see other people be open and honest and in the public eye, then I really enjoy it. So I think I'll always be like that. And as much as I was disappointed with Friday, I quickly got it out of my head, and I think I was tweeting on Saturday night saying I was confident for Sunday, which again was the truth, because I'd played well on Saturday. I'd lost to Richie Burnett and Robert Thornton, who both played very well against me, and I'd played well myself. So I knew my form had picked up, and I was confident going into Sunday, and that was the flip side. I went into that, and true to my word, I went and won it.
Absolutely. Well, lastly, before we let you go, you're well in the mix heading into that last Challenge Tour weekend next month, but we understand that you've already beaten Michael van Gerwen. Is this true?
Not individually, it's not. No, it was a pairs match. I think it was a quarterfinals of a German Open. I think Michael was about 16, but he was partner in Yellow Classic, who was a video world champion at the time. And Scott Kennedy from Aberdeen and myself did manage to win a pairs match against him, but I certainly wouldn't be shouting out about a win against a 16-year-old. My goodness, he could play it, man, but I think he won the World Masters a year after at 17, if my memory serves me, as in the men's event. I think he beat Martin Adams in the final. So, it was a great win in terms of quality, but I wouldn't be going around saying I've had the better of Michael van Gerwen. I'm sure that would come back to bite me one day.
Well, you're more humble than me. If that was me, I'd be tweeting it every day probably. But Shaun, really appreciate your time. I know we've took a lot of your time. Thanks very much for joining us. Congratulations again on the title of the weekend, and wish you all the best for the second Challenge Tour weekend coming up next month.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks very much for your time as well. All the best, Alex.
Thanks again to Shaun for joining us. Now to some news that broke just when we were recording our last show, so we wanted to talk about it on this week's show, and it is that the PDC have announced an extended Women's Series for 2021 from 4 events last year to 12 events this year. We've got 4 events coming up in Germany, 8 in the UK, 2 spots are going to be going to the World Championships, 2 spots for the Grand Slam. What are your thoughts?
No complaints. This is what I said needed to happen probably since series 1 of this show. And it took until the pandemic for the PDC to finally start a women's series, and it was obvious it was going to expand this year. There was no reason for it not to, since they had the time to plan it. Well, no reason other than obviously COVID for it to happen, and I'm glad they did. And I think 12 is a good amount for it to be, at least for now. I think eventually, get it up to 20 or 24 like the challenge and the development tours are at. But it does take some time to make sure that the demand is there, to make sure the resources are there, to make sure the quality is there. And I don't know if it was ready for 20 yet, especially since obviously the challenge and development tour are also at 12 this year. Next year, maybe it will be. We'll see how these go. And this is obviously going to be a great opportunity for all the players to play under the organization and the and just the overall clout of the PDC, which they don't normally until last year didn't ever get to do, but also to have that incentive of the spots in the Grand Slam, spots in the World Championship up for grabs is huge for them. And to have competitive in-person darts, especially after the past year where there's been very little. There's now been, since June, some WDF events slowly coming back onto the calendar. But for many of these women, the last time they may have played real professional caliber competitive darts would have been the Super Series last year if they entered. The Women's Series last year if they entered. So this is a long time coming for them. I think it's great. I'm glad that there's 3 different weekends of it now. I hope sometime in the future it'll be even more because the quality is there. The depth might not be yet, but the quality, especially at the top of the game, is there. And the more chances they get, the more that the quality at the top of the game will improve, but also that depth that's been missing will also start to develop. Because if you look back at the PDC a decade ago or 2 decades ago, there weren't 64 players who were capable of beating the world number 1. There were maybe 10. Obviously, on any given day, something can happen, but realistically, you didn't expect Phil Taylor to lose to the world number 15. Now, wouldn't be surprised if Gurren Price lost to the world number 100. That's the change in the game through the PDC system. Similar in the women's game right now. If the world number 1, Lisa Ashton, lost to the world number 15, it might even be a surprise. Through this series, that won't be the case a decade from now. This will develop the depth, and the more events you have, the more chances there are for that depth to develop.
I can't argue with that. And you've only got to look at last year. We saw the Women's Series debut. The previous year, of course, we had I think they had 2 events to form the qualifier for the World Championship. Last year, we had the 4 events. And, the number of entries, I know the PDC weren't particularly pleased with the number of entries that turned out for it. But, of course, there were factors behind that. Of course, we were still in the midst of the pandemic as we are now. But even worse at that point, as far as travel for players getting over, it was a good weekend. There was a lot of publicity that went into it. We saw how close it went, the 2 spots, especially that second spot between Peter Hedman and Fallon Sherrick coming down to, I don't know what we call it, most goals scored, away goals. I can't remember the terminology used for that, but it was very close between those 2 players. And the PDC, they put a lot behind it with the live stream as well, which was good. And we've come a long way from Barry Hearn appearing on this show. And when we mentioned the words Women's Tour to him, he related it to putting on a tour for people that part their hair a certain side. So the PDC have come a long way since then, and it is good that we have got more events on the tour this year, more opportunities for the ladies players. And as far as how far the PDC are going to go with a women's tour, it's not called a women's tour, but 12 events as opposed to 4 and over 3 weekends, it is heading in that direction. But I think there is a ceiling as far as how far the PDC are going to go with the women's game. You mentioned having a few more weekends. I think that is something that we will see in the future. Will we have a PDC Women's World Championship? I don't think we will. I think we've already seen from what Fallon Sherrick has done at Ali Pali and Lisa Ashton coming through at Q School that probably won't happen. But we are going to see in the future the WDF are going to have their World Championship. Mikuru Suzuki is going to be going back for the hat-trick. She's going to be trying to keep her quest to be the number 1 human. Hannah will like me mentioning that, but she's going to be in that. We've got the Girls World Championship as well. I don't think we've mentioned that on the show yet, but the WDF have split the World Youth between the boys and the girls. So again, that's going to be an opportunity for the younger players coming through to get involved in the game. But yeah, like I said, big opportunity for these ladies, and it's up to them now to embrace it, get involved in it, and again, feel part of the PDC setup, because the setup that they're going to have for these events is second to none. The professionalism that the PDC put into the Women's Series, the Challenge Tour, the Development Tour, all these feeder tours that they put on now, it's all set up like the Pro Tour, and it's a great opportunity for these ladies to see what the PDC setup is like before they maybe give Q School a go or give the Challenge Tour a go the following year. So yeah, thumbs up for me as well.
And now we'll move on to our last of this week's show, and it's with commentator and reigning Premier in League runner-up, Chris Murphy.
I'm pleased to say we're joined once again by the commentator, Chris Murphy. Thanks for the time, Chris. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure, and it's been a busy last 4 or 5 weeks for you commentating on the Pro Tour as well as the online league. The first half of 2021 was a little stop-start with events, so how good has it been to have been on the microphone more regularly again?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I did a stint of, I think, 9 out of 10 days commentating over the last couple of weeks for the online league, and then followed straight by the Pro Tour, which was thankfully in Barnsley, which is near where I live, so I was fortunate to stay at home. But yeah, it's been really good to just be back commentating regularly again. I really enjoy it, so I'm not going to complain. I used to clean windows, so I'll never moan about commentating.
Well, we had you last on the show just over a year ago, right after the Summer Series, which was the first in-person PDC event back from the long break. Looking back on the past year, though, without crowds, especially 2020, bit different without having the crowds there, but a lot of players still served up some memorable moments. How do you reflect on 2020?
Yeah, from a personal point of view, it's a strange one for me to reflect on, as most of the commentary that I do is events without crowds. Obviously missed the European Tour, and then I was fortunate enough to commentate on a couple of games at the World Championship on the radio for TalkSport, which is a big difference because obviously the crowd play a huge part, the noise of the crowd in radio broadcast. But in terms of in general, I found it really interesting to see that it seemed to be a bit of a leveller. But it seems like, as we start to get crowds back again, that actually those players who performed without crowds have kept that confidence and kept that bit of momentum with them. And the ones that started to struggle are kind of still not fully back to where they were before. So it might have done, in a strange way, a few players a favour because they've still managed to keep that confidence and know that they're able to win on the stage. And now the fact that the crowd has put in doesn't seem to have affected them. Dimitri Vandenberg obviously being the case in point at the World Match Play. But it's been really interesting just to see how the titles have been shared out a lot more over the last 12 months.
And one of the big changes we've seen during the last 12 months has been Gerwyn Price replacing Michael van Gerwen as the world number one. Starting with Gerwyn, what has most impressed you about his run to get to number one?
I think with any world number one, a lot of it is about mentality and attitude. When Price famously won that first Grand Slam title, there was a lot of controversy around the match. Became a bit of a pantomime villain, but he's managed to kind of use that to his advantage, and a kind of me against the world attitude, which you see in a lot of successful team sports where a manager might harness the team to think that everyone's against them, and he seems to have done that in a way in an individual sport. Belief in himself seems to keep getting better. I still don't think we've seen the best of him yet, which is remarkable, and he could be, at the top of the tree for quite a long time. But I think it's really strange to refer to Michael van Gerwen in commentary as the world number 3, not even the world number 2, but as the world number 3. So it takes some getting used to, and I think it's looking likely that we might see that number 1 spot change hands a few times as well in the coming months and years.
Yes, indeed. It's definitely strange to think of him as the world number 3, but that is where he is right now after 7 years as the world number 1. Michael van Gerwen has fallen off that, and you've worked closely with him in the past. Where do you think, though, his position right now is on the table? Is he the third best player in the world, or would you rank him somewhere different?
He's one of the top 3 players in the world. I certainly wouldn't put him as the best player in the world, but I think sometimes I'd feel uncomfortable putting him as a third best player in the world. I think we've got a top three. I think we've got there are other players that are trying to force their way into that, but for me, there's a clear top three. Might even seem generous to say that, having not won a title this year, not won a major title since the Players' Championship finals last year, but I think we have seen in his performances, particularly more recently, glimpses that he's still capable of as much as Peter Wright or Gerwyn Price. What we haven't seen recently is that he's capable of more than Peter Wright and Gerwyn Price. So I think it would be fair to say that they are the top three, and I think, pick your order. And I probably won't get drawn into that right now, but the where the rankings are, as much as the rankings can be skewed a little bit with the World Championship, I think they're probably about right for those three.
Let's take a closer look at the Pro Tour, and we're now 3/4 of the way through the Players' Championship events for this season. What have been the highlights that have stuck with you from what you've watched so far?
The last week, actually, the last Super Series in Barnsley, the three finals, all thrilling, all going all the way 8-7. Ryan Searle, absolutely fantastic in his win, and then Peter Wright again winning on the last day. Very interesting couple of finals that he played in, the Price as well winning. So I thought that the finals have been really good. It's fairly recent change. I think it's only a couple of years since they extended the format on the Pro Tour, and it's made a big difference actually to the finals and the semi-finals that have just got that little bit more stature from having the elongated leg format. There's been loads of 9-darters, not that many of them captured on the live stream, unfortunately, this year. I've personally not had the chance to commentate on one. I don't think, I may be wrong, but I don't think I have. And yeah, I'm just working with, from a personal level, just working with Dan and Paul. Obviously, Paul's been brought in since the start of the Super Series events in these big batches. And I even had the honour of commentating on a match with Rod Studd as well, which, he's a bit of a personal hero of mine. So that will live long in the memory.
Now, speaking of the Super Series, you mentioned the batches of them. PDC's continued at least through the end of this year with a series of 4 and a series of 3 to close it out, and each one this year would have been at least 3 events in a row. Do you think this is the future of how the Players' Championship events will be, or do you think in 2022 we'll go back to the normal doubleheaders?
I think that we may see a mixture. I personally prefer this route. Forget the fact that I'm commentating on it as a viewer. I think it's more interesting. You get to sort of watch 3 or 4 days of action, particularly when it's in the build-up to a major tournament, where a lot of the time every player in the field might have a chance to qualify, or at least a large chunk of the field ahead of a 4-day stretch of events. So I think like when we're going through the race to the match play or the race to the Grand Prix or whatever it might be, it just makes it more interesting, gives it a bit more of a focus for those days, rather than it just being another Pro Tour event, which often can be the case if it's sort of just a 2-day weekend event. And I also think it will, as the PDC continue to try and expand things like the European Tour or the World Series, it will open up new dates, because they can have the 3 or 4 Pro Tour events in the week, and all of a sudden weekends that weren't free before are free now.
You mentioned the Euro Tour. As far as the main tour is going to be quiet now for the rest of August, but the Euro Tour is planning a return in September, almost a year since the last one. How excited are you for its return?
Yeah, really excited. I'll be going out to Budapest, working with Dan and Paul Nicholson on that one. Never been to Hungary before, so yeah, really happy to be going to do that one. And then Rob Malarkey is going to do the one in Gibraltar. But yeah, I think it's really been missed, actually. It's such an important tour in terms of keeping tour cards, qualifying for things like the World Championship, and but a lot of players have missed out on that opportunity. The fans have missed out across Europe, and I think it's a really important thing that's up and running again. And I think I can't wait, so I can't imagine what Dan Dawson's feeling like right now.
Of course, similar people were saying last year around this time when we got those 3 Euro Tour events in at the back end of the year, the big stories to come out of that, of course, was Devin Peterson and Jose de Sousa winning their first Euro Tour titles. Devin Peterson, his first title of any sort. Devin's dropped off a bit this year, but for Jose, how pivotal do you think that win was, considering what he's gone on to achieve since then?
Yeah, definitely. I think that all he was probably missing was a little bit of belief that he could win. He seems to be the type of player that just wants to get up and throw his darts and doesn't really think about much, including sometimes the numbers that he's supposed to be throwing at. But I think he just needed that little bit of, belief. And once he got that, he started to beat all the big players, win a lot of big matches, and of course went on to pick up the Grand Slam title as well, and hit a 9-darter on TV as well. So I think, I said before about Gerwyn Price a lot, it's a bit about mentality. When Michael van Gerwen was at the top, he would always talk about confidence, and I think that just gave him that bit of confidence. With Devin, I think it was perhaps a little bit of the other way around, where he was playing so well that he felt he should be winning something. I'm not going to speculate on why his form's dropped off a little bit since then, but I kind of think for Jose, it was kind of just a consequence of playing well. He wasn't really aiming for it or expecting it, and he just carried on. But I think Devin was really, aiming to do that and trying to do that.
Another big darts tour is the Premier In League. We know your rival Dan Dawson, last time we spoke with him, was suffering with dartitis, unfortunately. How have your darts been going, and are you expecting to have a walkover win for the title this year?
Well, we did have, you may remember in the lockdown, some sort of remote games via the Dart Connect system, myself and Dan. And the last one I lost, and Dan revealed to me afterwards that he'd been severely suffering with dartitis during the match, and that was the final straw for me. So I ripped the board off the wall, and I didn't pick my darts up for some months after that. But I have been, I've been, taking a leaf out of Peter Wright's book and thinking, well, if I can just keep trying different darts, then maybe I'll be able to throw well again. And I've been throwing a little bit more recently. Not sure where Dan's at, but maybe there might be some opportunity somewhere to get a one-off. Maybe the Premier In League final in 2021 will be the only match of the Premier In League, but I think I'll win it.
Well, you mentioned that you played it online via Dart Connect. Of course, you also have been commentating on the online league. How have you found that so far? A little different with the shorter format and more games, different start times.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, actually. I wasn't quite sure how much more difficult it might be than obviously the ProTour stuff where you're commentating on a lot of the time the best players in the world, selected matches for the live stream, and obviously people who qualify for European Tour events when I go there. So with this being players that, like, some of them, I'll be honest, I'd not heard of before I commentated on them, so there's maybe a little bit more research required and things like that. But the tournament's organised really well, as I would expect. For me, it's quite a sort of personal journey as well, because it was Modus and Jason Taylor who gave me my first opportunity in darts 10 years ago. So to be back working at an event that they're running, commentating on it, which is kind of, where I wanted to be when I started out 10 years ago, is kind of really nice to be back working with that team as well. But, I've been not surprised by the quality, because a lot of the players who in it I do know, and they've dropped off the tour in reasonably recent years, have had great success in the past. But there have been some really, brilliant moments that I've commentated on. One of the things that I do a few of the things as well, work with Sporting Chance, work with the PDPA. One of the reasons for that is you can't commentate on darts, 5 days a week. But it's getting to the point where actually maybe you can. And it's felt like that the last few weeks, but I really enjoy it. Every game is different. There have been a couple of fantastic moments. Just the week that I commentated on a couple of weeks ago, we had Wes Newton tapping his shoulder on the opponent when he was about to throw a dart without a flight in, and he went on to hit a 180. I think that's the only time I've seen an opponent actually help their opposite number hit a maximum. And just some, really fun, fantastic stuff. And the standard in general has been decent, sort of lower end Pro Tour, higher end Challenge Tour type of stuff. So I think it's been a really good watch, and I think the short format probably helps that.
Good to hear. One of the reasons we wanted to get you on this week was to look ahead to Champions Week in the online league, which starts on Tuesday, culminates this Saturday. Richie Burnett back to defend his title, Fallon Sherrock, Mark Webster among the other names that all made it through. How do you see this week playing out?
Yeah, I'm covering it myself. I'm commentating on it, so I'm really looking forward to seeing particularly Fallon, players like Wayne Warren, who I've never commentated on before, Mark, who I thought when I watched him a couple of weeks ago was throwing really freely, which was fantastic to see. No sign of the dartitis that we just mentioned that he's really struggled with. So and Richard Burnett trying to defend his title. And again, when I was talking through the previous week, it looked at many points that he wouldn't make it to Champions Week. So maybe there's something in the stars there. I know that Colin Osborne's coming as a late replacement as well, and he played really good stuff a couple of weeks ago. I think there's a huge Welsh contingent, and I think that perhaps one of them will prevail. I'd love to see Mark Webster return to form by winning something like this, but I do genuinely think that Fallon Sherrock is going to be a very, very difficult opponent to get past, particularly over this format, as she showed on the week when she won it. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to go for a Mark Webster against Fallon Sherrock final, but I think Webster will win it in the end.
Well, speaking of Fallon Sherrock, that brings us to the next thing we wanted to discuss, the PDC Women's Series. You commentated on it last year alongside Colin Lloyd, and the PDC just announced an extension this year from the 4 events last year to 12 this year. How much of a boost do you think it will be for the ladies' game to have that?
Yeah, absolutely massive. I think it's good of the PDC because I think there was perhaps a little bit of disappointment in the numbers last year. I think they thought they might have got more people entering it. But they're going to carry on, giving opportunities to lady dart players, and I think that's the right thing to do. We wouldn't have, the moments that we had in recent years with Fallon winning at the World Championship, becoming the Queen of the Palace, if the PDC hadn't put in some form of qualifier. And off the back of that, I've obviously put in the Women's Series, which has expanded this year. I think the expansion will suit people like Fallon Sherrock. I think in any sporting event, the longer it goes on for, the more likely the best players are to rise to the top. So I think that you would feel that it would be likely that it would be Lisa Ashton and Fallon Sherrock qualifying, or Mikuru Suzuki if she does play in it. So I think that it's huge for ladies darts, and I think that the rest of the darts world, need to kind of remember what that win for Fallon Sherrock at the World Championship did for the whole game, because that did more that for the first match. I know she won 2 matches, but one win, that first win, did more in terms of growing darts globally than I think any World Championship win by any male player ever. So I think it's only fair that they keep giving women this platform to try and get to the point where they can challenge the men on a regular basis, and then we no longer would need the women's tour because it would be a level playing field, but it just takes, opportunities for it to get to that stage, and I think the PDC are doing the right thing.
Agreed with that. Well, the last darts that we've seen from the PDC was the Challenge Tour over the weekend, just finished yesterday, when we're talking a lot of buzz on social media about it, especially yesterday. We understand a player tested positive, and it meant more players were forced out of the last event, some cases mid-game. Did you catch any of it and see what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I saw obviously the withdrawals and the forfeits and everything like that on the Dart Connect as I was looking through. It looked all very strange, and I've seen the rumours for the reasons that have gone round on social media. I've seen that some management teams and players have kind of confirmed that seems to be what happened. I think it's a real shame that it's kind of symptomatic of what's going on in the world right now, that sort of you can get one in this case or a few in other cases, spoil it for everyone. And I think that's kind of seems to have been what's happened there. And the consequences for some people could be great as well, which is, I'm talking about darts consequences here. Obviously could be health consequences as well if, someone's actually been there spreading the virus. But in terms of darts, there are people that have missed out on a chance to qualify for a European Tour event. There is one player who's missed out on the chance to play in the Champions Week that we've just been talking about. A real, whatever happened, if the rumours are true, then a real sort of selfish, stupid act. And I think, again, just one really silly mistake, causing a lot of problems for people who are going to miss out on things through no fault of their own.
And lastly, we saw you in the orange Sheffield Wednesday shirt that you got for your birthday. Alex is a Colchester fan. They usually play in blue and white stripes just like you guys do. First, belated happy birthday. But second, how do you see Alex getting on in League One this season?
The blue and whites doesn't seem to be a lucky combination, does it? It's Colchester and Sheffield Wednesday both playing it. But the last couple of seasons actually have been a really difficult time to be a Sheffield Wednesday fan. It's been, comedy of errors and mistake after mistake, and I kind of was resigned to relegation for most of last season until the final day when all of a sudden I got my hopes up and we were up and down, and it somehow ended up finishing bottom of the league, and I kind of just switched off for it, focused on England at the European Championship, and I've made the mistake of getting a bit of hope back again, and it's always the hope that kills you. I watched the first game against Charlton the other day. They were okay. They've got quite a new players. They need to gel a little bit. I'm ridiculously going to say that I think they're going to get promoted. Obviously knowing that they will fail miserably at that, and then I will look stupid and feel as depressed as I normally do as a Sheffield Wednesday fan. But look, that's how we all start a new season, isn't it, in football, full of hope, full of false hope and pointless optimism that will come back to hurt us in the long run.
Definitely is. Well, Chris, thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it. Good luck with the Online League Champions Week this week and all the other PDC events that you've got coming up soon.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks again to Chris for joining us this week. Now we'll finish up with some listener questions. The first one comes from a friend of the show, Juanita McDade, who asks, who do you think improved their performances most at Super Series 6?
There's a few players I noted down earlier, and a couple of them I mentioned are new tour card holders for this year. Martin Lukeman got to a semi-final on the second day, beat some big name players, beat Ian White, Kim Hybrex, Johnny Clayton on that run to the semi-finals. Also on the third day, getting to a last 16, he beat Krzysztof Wachowski, so some impressive winners there from Martin. The other one, Lewis Williams, who very young player, of course. He's had a few scalps on the tour. I think he beat Michael van Gerwen on the first Super Series of the year, but got to his first quarter final on the first day, beating Nathan Aspinall, Jose de Souza, two Premier League players, which is pretty good going. A couple other players I want to give a mention to, and maybe not improved his performances, because I think personally he's been one of the most impressive players this year without really pulling up many trees as far as big results, getting to finals, semi-finals, winning titles. But Martin Schindler, since he's come back on the tour this year, lost his tour card at the end of last year, and it's always hard to predict how these players are going to do. Are they going to be able to get their tour card back at the first attempt at Q School? Are they going to have to go through the Challenge Tour, the Development Tour, and do it that way? He came back with a bang, bounced straight back at Q School, got his tour card, and had a couple of quarterfinals last week as well. So he's starting to get the results that maybe his form has been showing this year.
Well, I'll start with someone we talked about earlier, and that's Ryan Searle. And, this entire season's just been a steady increase in his performances. But if we just take his averages across 13 matches at this past Super Series, his lowest was 94.49 in beating the world number one. So that's his worst in terms of averages, performances across 13 matches. The 56 matches before that this year, 22 times, or nearly 40% of the matches, he averaged below 94.49. So if that's not improvement, I don't know what is. He went from something he was doing 40% of the time that was not good to never doing it. And you mentioned earlier, he had 116.9 in one match and at a bunch of other ton-plus averages. Granted, you could say his improvement did really start at Super Series 5, but he took it to another level in Super Series 6. But I'll mention, since we spoke so much about him, I'll talk about one other player who we don't talk about that much on the show, and that's Joe Marnan. Quietly been averaging in the low to mid-90s all season, but he did step up just a bit this past set of matches, winning his first board of the year and just taking that 91 average he was doing most of the year and averaging 94, 95 more often now. And that makes a big difference. Just adding a few points to his average led to him winning a board. and a board that wasn't an easy board. Had to beat Chris Dobie, who was coming off a title not that long ago in the second round. Had to beat Adrian Lewis, who's been bouncing back to some form before going out to the man you mentioned, Martin Schindler, in the last 16. And he won a match each of the other 2 days as well, before losing to some of the form players in the world in Ross Smith and Peter Wright. So for Joe Marnan, a player we haven't talked about that much, lifted his game that little bit. But that little bit was all that was needed for him to go from a player who wasn't getting results and wasn't picking up wins to winning his first board and getting a couple other quality wins as well.
And our last question for this week's show comes from our friend of the show, Dartscast, who says, now the business end of the season is in sight with the TV majors coming quickly between September and the end of the year. Who really has to up their game to save their tour card, and who might make the most gains too?
Well, this is another tough question because there's a lot of really established players who are in danger of losing their tour card, especially if they don't make the World Championships. And we can mention the obvious players like Jelle Klaassen, who missed the Worlds last year, Justin Pipe, who also missed Worlds, Darren Webster, who gone from in the conversation for Premier League to nowhere near qualifying for anything. But there's some few other players, including those that made the World Championships last year, that still have work to do to get in this year. John Henderson, Mickey Mansell need results if they're going to save their tour card. Andy Hamilton as well, who last year we were talking about, was he resurrecting his career and just hasn't found his game this year, although did just win his first board this past Super Series. So another player who's coming out strong. But there's a lot of players who still have work to do to save their tour card. And whether they have the game right now to do it is another question. As far as who might make the most gains, though, I'll start with one of those people on a first-year tour card, and I'll start with two of them, actually. Raymond Van Barneveld hasn't done that much since winning that title early this year, but at the same time has still been playing fairly well, but will be in most of the other TV events at the back end of the year. Big chance for him to finish that first year in the top 64, if not higher. And Scott Mitchell as well, just did very well on the Challenge Tour last year, but didn't have that tour card. This year has it, and just been consistently cashing at all the Players' Championship events, consistently playing fairly well. He'll be in probably the Players' Championship finals at the end of the year. He'll maybe get into one of those other TV events, and obviously will get in the World Championships, and big chance in his first season on the PDC Senior Tour to really move up the rankings.
Yeah, some good picks there. Before I go through mine, just a shout out to Dartscast as well, who's labelled us the purest podcast for darts fans. We'll call him the purest YouTube channel for darts fans. Go and check him out on YouTube if you haven't already. I'll start off with players that I guess need to up their game before they lose their tour card at the end of the year. And you mentioned a few, that some of the big names, I guess established names in the PDC, Jelle Klaassen, Justin Pipe, Darren Webster, who really need to up it, didn't they, for the next few months, get into the World Championship or the Players' Championship finals, or even the Grand Slam qualifiers, get through them and have a good run that week in Wolverhampton. So there's still opportunities for these players. You've still got 7 more Players' Championships as well. You've got the couple of European tours that we know are going to happen next month. Whether there's any more, we don't know yet, but there are opportunities for these players. And speaking of opportunities, Lisa Ashton, we've just spoke about the Women's Series that's coming back. She's going to be involved in that. Can she get the spots for the World Championship and the Grand Slam? That could be huge for her, keeping her tour card and getting in that top 64. So that's going to be a big weekend, 3 weekends for her coming up to save her tour card, and would be great to see, wouldn't it, Lisa Ashton getting that top 64 and keep her tour card for another year. As far as players making those gains up the rankings, you mentioned some of the players that are on their first year on the tour card. Well, how about the highest ranked player of those lot, and that is Dirk van Dijvenbode. Still hard to believe that this is his second year with his tour card. Of course, he's had one before, but he's getting towards that top 16. And if he could do what he did at the back end of last year, the back end of this year, get to a couple of quarterfinals, get to a TV final, we could be going into next year with him as a top 10 player. So a lot for him to achieve over the next few months. I know his form's dipped a little bit. Martin Clearmaker as well, a player that's not got any World Championship money on his ranking because of, unfortunately, having to pull out due to the virus last year, but he's well set to qualify for a lot of big events this year. He could really make a push towards the top 40, top 32. And Callum Ridds as well. We've just seen him get to the World Match Play quarterfinals, another one that's on their second year of their tour card. He could be someone that could maybe crack the top 32 this year as well.
Now, anything else for this week?
As always, we have to say big thank you to our guests for joining us. Big thank you to our listeners for listening in. Everyone who supports us on our Patreon as well. We appreciate the support. Our Dartscast trivia a couple of weeks ago now, since our last episode, the question was, who is the youngest player to win both the PDC World Championship and the World Match Play? Of course, the answer was Michael Van Gerwen at the age of 26. John Thompson was the first to get that one right. And here is this week's Dartscast trivia, courtesy of the Darting Nerd.
Well, it's quiz time now on the weekly Dartscast, and we want to know whether you can name the 5 players who appeared in finals in the PDC Women's Series last year. That's the 5 players who appeared in finals in the PDC Women's Series last year. Get those thinking caps on. Good luck.
Thank you for that question from Matt. Can't believe, as we said earlier, that we're getting to the business end of the season, which means it's only a few months to the World Championships. So a lot that will be coming over the next few months as season 2021, surprisingly, it wasn't as unpredictable as last year, but surprisingly, so far has been fairly close. But it seems like we're starting to get an understanding of what the calendar will be like for the rest of the year. So we'll try to bring you some players who will be in those Euro Tour events next month, I should say, as well as some players who will be playing in those TV events. Please keep sending us your questions and suggestions you have. We are the purist podcast in darts, or at least podcast for the purists. And we'll try to keep it that way, but you need to let us know what you want to hear, and we'll do our best to deliver it. So until then, though, hang tight.